Hey guys, this is Sundown here. It's going to be my chapter review to One Punch Man 92, Manhole. Now, let me just apologize in advance for the noise. You'll be hearing like quad bikes in the distance for some strange reason. They're just all over the place for some reason. Now, this chapter 92 of One Punch Man, dope chapter, and this is going to be kind of a long ass review because there's quite a lot of stuff to get through. I mean, like, I didn't want to go through it page by page, but really I feel like I need to with this chapter. So the chapter starts obviously with Saitama brushing his teeth, putting on his hero suit and leaving his apartment to check up on Z City. Meanwhile, Gyoro and Garo have a conversation. Gyoro tells Garo that he is more of a half monster at this point, not really a fully fledged monster, which is obvious because Garo still, his only one of his eyes is blackened off in terms of the sclera. And only he hasn't really undergone any physical transformations other than that, but his body strength is and will continue to increase at a frightening pace according to Gyoro. This is going to be a hard chapter to talk about because we got Gyoro and we got Garo. So Gyoro tells Garo that he can raise him into being the strongest monster, to which Garo obviously responds with, "Are you going to teach me some like new techniques? Are you going to teach me how your telekinesis works or something like that?" And Gyoro says rather than teach Garo a new technique, he's going to tell Garo how monsterification works. So put simply, monsterification works like this. This is Gyoro's method of raising a monster. So what he does is he gets a human and he basically puts them in a situation where they must overcome their death multiple times, numerous amount of times. And essentially what they do is these humans need to be put in a life or death situation, fail, almost die, but through like will, through luck, sheer determination, through just survivability, they need to survive. So they need to be basically put through this death numerous times and survive. And Gyoro then tells him of how careful they need to be because of the physical and mental stress it places on an individual. Too much of like physical stress and they can die, or too much mental stress and they can lose their minds and therefore lose their intelligence, becoming a very normal monster, a very lower ranked monster. So the key here is to make sure that the near-death experience or experiences are suitable for the subject and are specific to the subject and their skill level, so that they're not driven into insanity or just they lose their lives through the difficulty of the task. So Garo then states that it sounds like Gyoro has done a lot of testing to come to this conclusion, to which Gyoro says he has tested on so many individuals that he's lost count. So he's a bit of a psychopath. I mean, like, it's cool to hear like of all the different things he's done in terms of his research. He tells us of the monster cells and how these individuals transformed into kind of like a quasi-monster state. They're not actually monsters. They may appear to be monsters, but they're more like seemingly monsters. They're not actually monsters. And he only witnessed average improvements with no further growth. But he tells us of all this kind of stuff, and the research aspect of it is really interesting and everything like that. But he's a psychopath, man. I'd say, Gyoro is crazy. So talking of those monster cells, it does seem like the ingestion of monster cells is just a quick fix method, but not one that actually works in the long term, which is kind of, when you look back at that whole tournament arc and how there were monster cells flying all over the place, it did seem like that kind of thing. It's just a quick fix. If you want quick power, we can give you quick power, but it's not something that's going to last long term, especially because it doesn't seem to promote further growth. So Gyoro then tells us of a few things he did try to use to break this kind of growth limit his subjects had. So I think he used a lot of monster subjects, but probably also human subjects. But a lot of the stuff he used was stuff like he fed monsters to each other, so they devoured each other. He provided blood transfusions. He transplanted cells between monsters. He had monsters mate with one another. He inflicted pain and stress on them, amplified their anger, and so much more. Basically, all of this done just to try and break this kind of growth limit that he found in monsters. Why can't they get to the dragon level and beyond? Why is it that all these test subjects I have are dying prematurely? So he does all of this, and like I mentioned before, Gyoro is an actual madman. I mean, like, all of this stuff, he's getting them to mate with each other and then eating each other and stuff like that. It sounds like some human centipede level stuff he was doing while he's trying to break this growth limit. So I like how we got that whole list of things that Gyoro tried but failed with, and then the next panel we have after he kind of lists all his failures is just Garo kind of just there juxtaposing his failures with what looks to be possibly his greatest success, or the potential for his greatest success in Garo. So finally, Gyorogoro found that by overcoming death numerous times, as I mentioned before, his subjects could grow explosively. And however, even though he tried this, all of his subjects died before reaching the level of dragon, like I mentioned before, until one day he actually tasted success. And here is the mysterious part of the chapter where everyone who hasn't read the webcomics, like myself, is kind of confused as to who this individual is, and or what's going on, or what the relationships are between this individual and other people. So we see a light-haired woman, possibly silver-haired, possibly blonde, just a light-haired individual. And it's a woman. So we see a light-haired woman with glasses, wearing a brooch and earrings in the shape of what's referred to as Ouroboros, and the brooch kind of ties together this cape that she's wearing. It's like this half cowl thing. And usually the Ouroboros is referred to in when you're talking about the concept of infinity, so creation through destruction, life out of death. And she's got like snakes across her waistband as well. So I thought that was a very apt character design. She wears glasses, as I mentioned that, but she wears. I thought this was a very apt character design for someone who proceeds to create a monster out of this human individual, someone who has lost touch with their human side. So she's creating kind of life out of death. We've already been told that monsterification occurs when you put these individuals, these humans, through death situations, life or death situations numerous times, and they're basically almost dead, and they have to come back from the brink of death. So she created a monster, or she helped create a monster by the looks of things, Orochi, through this method. So basically that Ouroboros thing, very apt design, because you're creating that life out of death. And she, like I said, she mentions, she goes to this individual and she mentions that, you've lost touch of your human side. But what I wanted to know here was, how did she know that this specific dude had lost touch with his human side? Because it was Orochi's human form. He's silhouetted, so we don't actually know who he was. She just walks up to him one day like, "Hey, you've lost touch with your human side. Here's a free sample." And I was like, how did you know though? So this woman has to be important to the story, and I want to know who she is. Obviously no spoilers from the webcomics. Now, is she partnered with Gyorogoro, or are they simply kind of making use of each other? Gyorogoro's making use of her, and she's making use of him to further each other's research. Maybe she's a scientist or something, and she has research in some other field, and she wants to look into this and see where it would take her. So either way, she knows this individual wants to go on a rampage, and through this method that Gyorogoro talks about, we see the birth and the initial form of the monster known as Orochi. And he looks awesome, he's still like this smaller, skinnier form. His horns are still there, and his mask is slightly different, but you can tell straight away that it is Orochi. So with this, Gyorogoro tells Garo that he has even more potential than Orochi ever had, and he's come even closer because of his encounter with Royal Ripper, and how he was basically left on death's door, or at death's door, and now he's back and he's stronger and everything like that. So with the promise of training Garo to become even stronger than Orochi, Gyorogoro asks Garo to join him in his conquest to rid the world of heroes. Now Garo obviously doesn't like this one bit. I think he's more of the type of guy he prefers to attain his strength his own way, and without the help of others. He wants to become the best by himself, without any external help, so that he can say at the end of the day that I did this. It was this was my achievement. So he tells Gyorogoro to do one, to which Gyorogoro says, "It's too late, bruh. I've already got my eye on you." Very apt, because he only has the one eye. Garo and Gyorogoro then prepare to fight, as Gyorogoro mocks Garo for not being able to move, trapped within his psychokinesis. He then goes on a villain rant, talking about how his Esper abilities, which is ESP, psychokinesis, telekinesis, all that type of stuff, how his Esper abilities surpass even the two famed witches, Tatsumaki and Fubuki. Now, I understand him mentioning Tatsumaki. She's a famed ESP kind of utilizer. And even though Fubuki is quite famous as well, she hasn't really proven her worth as of yet. So it was just weird to see a Monster Association executive, especially one at Dragon level, who could demolish Fubuki for jokes, mention Fubuki as being like a famed witch, especially one of the two who can use telekinesis or psychokinesis. However, much to Gyorogoro's surprise, Garo takes a step forward, then moves his arm and continues to gain movement with time. So Garo sees it as, his fighting spirit is enabling him to break the psychokinesis, but Gyorogoro sees it as Garo's adaptive abilities being excellent. Let me just put my phone on silent. So he sees it as Garo's adaptive abilities being excellent. A difference of opinion really between a fighter and a scholar in Gyoro. So at this point, Gyoro realizes that it won't be easy to control Garo. So the fight begins. Gyoro attacks Garo with a whole bunch of rubble, trapping Garo in what is essentially a rock cocoon. However, Garo realizes that Gyoro can't bind him with his psychokinesis while attacking him with his psychokinesis, and easily shrugs off the attack. So once again, we see Garo's incredible battle logic and battle intelligence, and even Gyoro is surprised by this. He's just like, oh shit, well, he clocked onto my abilities pretty quick. So with this, Garo tells Gyoro that the idea of a lowly monster like him cultivating a genius like himself is absurd. He then makes his thoughts known to Gyoro. If he crushes the head of the Monster Association, the rest will surely crumble. So that's what he proceeds to do. We then get one of my favorite panels of this whole chapter. It was so good, where Garo is kind of hunched over, he's squatting down on his toes, and he says, "The hunt is on." And I was like, oh my god, it was so well drawn. And you see him, he's squinting. He's not really squinting. He's just frowning, and he's prepared. He's honing himself in on Gyoro, and he's just prepared. It looks awesome. What a beast. So once again, Murata with the art style and his artwork has just been insane. Like, every One Punch Man chapter actually since the beginning has been really, really well drawn. So at this point, Gyoro tells Garo that the heroes are supposed to arrive soon, and he has no time to waste, nor any stamina to waste on Garo. So he calls in reinforcements. He calls in his boydem, King Orochi. Now, this part of the chapter was crazy. From here on out, it was just absolute madness. We see Orochi's nails. I thought it was his horns at first, but it must have been his nails or his fingers explode through the ground. They must have been elongated as well, and they kind of just grasp around Garo in a very firm grip. And as he's dragged down to hell, coughing up blood, Gyoro does like a little shimmy. He's just like, nah. And I was like, that was weird. Activating some sort of machinery around the Monster Association, opening up the ground and allowing Gyoro to get down to ground level, which is where Orochi and Garo are now, after Garo gets dragged down. So we see the sheer size of Orochi. He's a big lad, and he looks intimidating as hell, And we also see that there are monsters on the sides, on the corridors, on the ramparts, just watching all of this going down. And Gyoro asks at this point Orochi not to kill Garo. So Orochi kind of just crushes him in his hand and drops him on the floor. Garo gets up pretty easy. He gets back up pretty easily, and he then notices that one of Orochi's horns are moving. So this horn stretches forward, shooting out like a missile, impaling the floor where Garo once stood, with Garo narrowly dodging. However, the horn continues to move, catching Garo off guard and actually impaling him in the midriff. And I was like, yo, shit, like this is a big concern for Garo at the moment. So with Garo stuck in a hole in the wall with a hole in his torso, Gyoro tells us that when Orochi first became a monster, his horns were the first feature on him to manifest, So he was, imagine that, he was just a human. Well, actually, I'm not too sure. I imagined at first a human just with horns, but with that, he said when he became a monster. So I don't know. His horns couldn't have been the first thing to manifest. If he became a monster, it would have been his physique, I don't know, but his horns were the first thing to manifest. And according to Gyoro, they're heavy, flexible, and fast. We've seen that, but more importantly, they have a very long reach, and Orochi can control them freely, hence why it impaled the floor and then just curved back up and impaled Garo. But Garo gets up, smiling away his pain. This encourages a barrage of horn attacks from Orochi, which are deflected away by Garo as he desperately tries to stay alive. Garo leaps into the walkways surrounding Orochi, where other monsters are gathered just watching, and they all just kind of look at Garo like shit. And he runs as Orochi continues to attack, slicing through the monsters in his way, while Orochi stabs through them, kind of putting them back together. So Garo runs like he's never run before, gaining speed and looking hardcore like the Flash. We then get this awesome double spread of Garo ping-ponging around, dodging Orochi's devastating horn attacks. It was really well drawn double spread, and it was a really well drawn chapter. So as we've seen before, Garo realizes that he can't win by dodging and he needs to attack, so he leaps in, coiling himself up to throw a devastating blow at Orochi, assuming his vitals are in all the same places as a human because he used to be one. So he's like, yeah, if I just hit him in the torso, I'll get something vital. But it's on this panel where you see the mouth of Orochi's kind of faceplate just crack at the seams, right at the corners of his where his lips meet. They just his faceplate just cracks away. It's kind of like rocks falling away. And right on cue, some alien shit goes down, with several rows of teeth and gums flying out of of Orochi's original mouth, and they just fly out, and you're just like, what the shit? Like, so it's just insane. And I was actually really surprised. I thought Orochi would be humanoid, and when you get to the end of this chapter, it's nothing like that. So luckily enough, Garo escapes, but looks back to see Orochi's true form. So Orochi's true form, much like his name, a creature definitely inspired by the 8-headed and 8-tailed beast of Japanese mythology, the Yamata no Orochi. This Orochi is the Orochi in this story is a dragon with many different tendrils coming out of him. Also with like these tendrils all have like dragon heads, arms, and jaws and teeth, so they can bite, they can punch, all that type of stuff. And he looks awesome. Major props to Murata. But it's important to know, I just need to convey this bit of information once, that Orochi seems to have his normal body composed of these like dragon tendrils, and they kind of coil around each other to form his limbs. But in his dragon state, they uncoil and unwind, and then they all assume their own like dragon head thingy. So it's why all around Orochi's body you see these like eyes and dragon heads releasing like little bits of like muscle, but it's actually just they're all separate parts that wind together into a whole. So you can see it mostly with his huge ass arms, and when they unravel to form these new body parts, and then they recoil to form his arm again. So Garo has enough time to make a quip about fighting a monster dog beforehand, which was Rover, and now the king of earthworms. Funny guy. So Orochi proceeds to attack Garo with a whole bunch of heat blasts from different heads, like I mentioned before. Even his main head, so his like I said before, his arms unwind and uncoil into these other different dragon heads, and they will shoot this heat blast at Garo, especially the main head. And somehow, some way, Garo stands with his guard up, simply taking the heat blast and waiting for it to pass. And just like the rest of the fight, Gyoro watches, analyzing Garo, seeing where his strengths lie. And even now, it looks like he's just using Orochi as fodder, really, for Garo's growth. So I feel kind of bad for Orochi, because he's just being used to better his replacement. So we get another awesome page where Orochi stood amongst the flames of his destruction with his cape set ablaze. This was such, like I said before, it's just such a well drawn chapter. Just look at that double spread where his cape is ablaze and there's fire all around him and his dragons are all flying all over the place. Such a well drawn chapter. So Orochi then tightens the cords of one of his arms back together, like I mentioned before, making one of his original arms. I think it was his right arm. He closes his fist and launches a dirty punch at Garo. I was so surprised here, because even with the amount of force Orochi put behind that punch, Garo actually blocks it, and his strength is increasing fast. It's not even a joke. Garo is getting insanely strong, insanely fast, and I can't wait for him to take on any of the S-class heroes, or maybe even Saitama, because I think that's going to be like endgame stuff. Maybe he takes on Saitama. But legit, he blocks Orochi's attack, only for the ground beneath him to break apart because of the impact and destroy Garo's footing, sending him flying into a wall. So Orochi's arm then recoils like it was made out of elastic, very reminiscent of actually Luffy from One Piece, while Gyoro tells Garo to just give it up. He's like, your ass has been handed to you, just give it up. So we get another badass moment from Garo, with him getting back up, and his face, he has this like face print in the rubble, because his face just smashed into the rubble, and the face print is actually smiling, and what you realize is that Garo was smiling as he was hit into the rubble. So, and it's just such a crazy manic smile that's stuck in the rubble. It's brilliant. I just really enjoyed it. Garo is crazy at this point. So as Garo gets up, he reminds Gyoro that he is a genius and won't fall for the same attack twice. So he also tells Gyoro that although Orochi is strong, he lacks one thing, and then proceeds to not tell us that one thing, instead telling us how unafraid of Orochi he is, how unintimidating he thinks Orochi is. Garo looks like a complete maniac when he says this. I really enjoyed this panel as well. Like I said, the artwork, I said it like a million times, I'm going to say it again. The artwork this chapter was insane. His face and his hair blacked out as he grinds his teeth together. Awesome panel. Garo prepares himself then to unleash a devastating attack, telling us that the one thing that Orochi lacked, I think at least, was technique. So he may be big, he may be big, he may be strong, but he has no technique. So Garo assumes his stance, dead serious, dropping all these cool lines like, "Now, fear me." And then we see something very unusual with Orochi. He recoils both of his arms, reforming both of his arms, hiding his multiple jaws behind his mask once again. He raises his arms, and the fires are still burning over his chest and shoulders, and he takes the exact same stance as Garo. Garo is up shit creek at this point, and he's just like, oh my god, what's he doing? So it turns out Orochi is a genius as well, and he's able to copy any techniques he sees just once. So it's safe to assume, I think at this point, that Orochi was a martial artist prior to his monsterification. So I think that's a definite. Orochi then drops a cool line for once, telling Garo that he will grant him his wish of wanting to feel terror. So Garo seems super impressed, but makes a good point when he says that Orochi is copying a fighting style that he knows all too well. So surely it's an advantage to Garo. We also see Garo hiding a fist behind his back. He's just kind of there like that, disallowing Orochi from seeing and copying his technique, because he can look at it once and copy it. So with one final burst, Garo rockets towards Orochi's head, not making the same mistake as Thor. He's going for the head, always going for the head. So with one final double spread, we see Orochi's arm dragons all attack with their fists, actually replicating Garo's technique, whilst Garo tries to hit Orochi. Everything blacks out, and we see Garo buried in a wall, while Gyoro analyzes his motivations and drive. He's like, you're obsessed with defeating all these heroes. You have a deep longing to be a monster, but you possess no hint of the kind of callous cruelty or monstrous ambition of a monster. So you can't let go of your humanity. That's something that they can't really accept. But Gyoro also says that he's confident that he will be able to brainwash Garo in the end, and revels in the chance of having more aces to rely on in his battle against the heroes, having Orochi and having Garo, seeing as he suspects the heroes have something beyond the S-class. And then we switch back to Saitama, right on cue. So Saitama stands next to a manhole, having heard the entire fight between Garo and Orochi. He sits and removes the lid for the manhole, considering whether it's worth his time going down there and seeing what the hell that was all about. So that's how the chapter ends. Awesome chapter. And through this, Garo will no doubt get stronger, become more monstrous, and just more awesome in general. The heroes are approaching, so maybe now we'll see more hero association versus monster association related chapters, and I'm fully hyped to see that. See the kind of war between the monsters and the heroes finally go down. And obviously I want to know who was that lady who coerced human Orochi into becoming a monster. Obviously no spoilers. And will Saitama go down into the manhole and begin the war prematurely? So let me know what you guys thought of the chapter. Let me know what you guys thought of this review. Like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. And I'll see you guys in a bit.